I think it would have been mid-October 2009. Steve Foster, who was head of the live department, he was in charge of all live stuff at the Mama Group. He got in touch and said that they were starting a new type of festival. It was a classic rock festival. It's called High Voltage, but it also catered for prog bands. So it would have a classic rock stage and it would have a prog stage, and everybody there would be a kind of cross between progressive and classic rock. This was going to be a long weekend with top classic rock bands on the bill, and they wanted, to cut a long story short, they wanted ELP to close it. Were ELP up for a 40th anniversary reunion in London, playing in front of fans from all around the world. So I spoke to Stuart straight away.
And when Martin mentioned it to me, I said, no, I can't believe they will do it, because they don't want to work together. So Martin said, well, should we try? Well, why not?
Literally within an hour, we contacted all three, and Carl and Greg and Keith. And
to my inordinate surprise, they agreed to do it as a one-off show.
I felt excited because I could see the beauty in having ELP reform back in London, where it all began really for us, and playing this to show, nostalgia, I suppose. I could see the power of the nostalgia. I could see also the beauty for people who'd never seen the band, younger people, their one chance to see this legendary band from the past.
Festivals in general, for me, have always been a mixture of apprehension, because you really are at the mercy of the elements. If it rains, ELP have always used concert halls as an extension of their instruments. We use the acoustics. Of course, at festivals, you don't have that opportunity. There's no chance of a sound check. And with my equipment, you really are at the mercy of is it all going to work?
Stuart Young phoned me and told me that the band were getting together to play this concert.
Well, first of all, I was stunned, and then I was delighted to hear that they were going to do it. I didn't think they would, because there was so much water under the bridge, and they all had their different projects. They had all been working on different bands, and it seemed that the problems were intractable, that they would ever actually get back together. And so it was great news, especially for all their fans around the world.
When I heard that they were getting back together to do that one-off show at High Voltage, I was extremely excited.
I was excited instantly. It was like turning back the clock, and I planned the whole weekend. I took my wife and my young daughter, my 15-year-old, and we were going to go to the concert, and I got all the backstage passes, and it was fabulous for me.
I went right to the internet and got my flight, my reservations, my hotel. I got everything.
You go and see a spectacle like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You see the explosions, whatever they've got going on, and I think the one thing that we were a little bit worried about was that we wouldn't be able to deliver something that ELP could deliver in its prime. The spectacle, the event status of it.
I realised we hadn't been performing together for many years, and that the musical bar for ELP is high. We're performing music at the age of 60 and plus that we created at the age of 20 plus. So some of this music was hard to perform physically, and just hard to perform. So it wasn't just a question of doing 5 days rehearsal, jump on and play ELP as you did when you were 20. That part of it I realised would take some considerable work to achieve a level of performance that did justice to the legend of ELP. We really needed to set up as we would on a very big festival stage. Wasn't the sort of thing we could do in a little rehearsal room. We had to be set up really as we were going to perform.
When you're a musician, there's a certain time that you have when you're rehearsing, when it's there. And I want to be always at a point where I know what I've got to play, but I've really got to concentrate to make sure I play it at a high level. And then there's a certain amount of kind of anger, aggression, enthusiasm in your playing, because you really want to get it right. You don't want to be, mad. You don't want to sort of get upset with yourself so that you're angry if anything goes wrong. So you really fight to get it right. And I like this kind of tension.
I sensed that the three of them were nervous, apprehensive, but there was an excitement. There was no question about that, and the anticipation in the whole event, and the audience were waiting, and for the three of them to get out and walk on stage again. And just before they went on stage, I was stage left with them, and all three of them. Greg was saying, "I'm nervous," and it was a big event for them.
So it was a great day, and the nice thing was that when I arrived there were lots of people coming up to me saying, you used to write about ELP. So I was kind of recognised as an ELP fan as well, which is nice to think that it was like a community of ELP fanatics all gathering to see them.
It was bizarre because it was so similar. There was Greg, his dressing room full up. He was walking around chatting to everyone. Carl, sitting in his dressing room, beating away at his drums, a bit tense, and no one going near Keith. Being on the side of the stage and looking out into the audience was absolutely no different from 35 or however many years ago it was. I loved seeing the age differences. There were guys, up in their 60s and young kids. And there was an anticipation and an awaiting for this event. And apart from 35 years ago, everyone was much younger. It was very similar, and you could feel the electricity.
They put on a great show. The show was amazing. They had fireworks like the old days. And the revolving drum set. Keith had the Moog. Greg had his carpet. They were all ready to go. Like they never stopped.
People were waiting expectantly for how good would they be? How, could they really get it back together? And of course we needn't have been worried at all because ELP came back firing on all cylinders.
Everybody was extremely excited. I mean, there were ELP t-shirts all over the place. People were going nuts before they even went on stage.
And it was quite an emotional experience to hear them playing all that exciting music that only they could create.
It was very emotional. I spent some very, moving, emotive times with those boys, and I was lucky because I was up on the side of the stage next to Keith, where I'd spent so many hours and years watching them on stage, and seeing Keith still turning round during a lick or something and smiling at me was great.
I enjoyed the nostalgia part of it immensely. I thought it was really great to give the fans something back like that after all that time, because we hadn't been around for 12 years. It's a long time. It was the 40th anniversary, was the first time ever for a festival dedicated to prog rock, and we were on it. So I felt really good about that.
I've never known a festival to go without some sort of mishap.
We were very badly let down with the technology. It was a tough gig to play. Monitors were dreadful,
we were in the wings, and the band before us had run slightly over. And from what I've learned, I think there were some ugly moments with my road crew, which of course got back to me in the wings, which doesn't really help before you have to play, such complicated music.
We did have a problem with time. There was like an hour and a half. It was a Sunday night.
So we were obviously very, very concerned about that. We got to get on stage, and we had to get off by 10:30.
We had to get basically what we had, an hour 50-minute set into an hour 30. And of course, stuff had to be removed, and how do you do this and do that?
Oh, I do remember though, that at the end, and Carl hadn't quite got into his drum solo, and I'm looking at my watch, and then Stuart Young, the manager, can you believe this? He comes on stage and he's yelling in my ear, "You've only got 7 more minutes." Right, drum solo, come on, get let's complete the job, Gosh, I mean, we actually did finish dead on 10:30.
But it paled into insignificance when you feel the warmth of the audience. So the warmth and the response of the audience just washes all that stuff away. And because ELP is a good band, we kind of performed through it. We just performed through it. And we're good. We're a good band. So we just rode through it, And at the end of it, it was fabulous, and people loved it.
It was a kind of a risk to just come back to play one show.
It was a struggle, but I'm glad that we did pull it off.
But the actual power of the show for the audience and for me was pretty amazing.
The end of the concert was, wow. And part of me wanted it to carry on. And it was very strange being there, because it was like everything was throwbacks to whether it was Madison Square Gardens or Paris or wherever.
There was a huge warmth, and not because it wasn't raining, but there was a warmth between the three in the band. There was a warmth between the band and the fans, and there was a warmth overall. And if there's one overriding memory, it was it was a very happy occasion. There's something about fulfilment that, and at that level, only Keith and Carl and Greg can tell you exactly what it was for them. I mean, the highs that they hopefully rode on that evening, at least part of that evening, and the warmth between the three of them. That people in bands tell me, the successful bands, that there comes a time when you're actually on the stage, and you don't know where you are. You're actually in unison with everybody. You're riding the car together. You're actually all on the same plane together, and you're locked in. I think that's the phrase. That they're locked in. That happened definitely on that evening. That the three of them locked in, and also the audience did as well.
Well, there were many successes in their career. The first show they did, big show, was the Isle of Wight. It was a huge success. That changed everything for them. We also did, we performed at a festival called California Jam. A lot of artists, we were the headliners, and we had 350,000 people pay to come to that show, and it was a spectacular show, and it was on television, and that was probably one of the peaks of their career. And then I remember when they played Madison Square Gardens with the orchestra, and they played 3 nights, sold out. I remember the first night, when you walked in, there was an electric feeling before the band went on stage that was indescribable. And the concert was unbelievable. And people are still talking about that show.
We were saber rattling. We were great musicians. We set an industry standard. the fact that the journalists at the time didn't realise what was going on and called it sabre rattling is immaterial, because today what we did is so small in the big picture. When you look at bands like U2, Rolling Stones, the shows these bands have put on.
They were prepared to take chances. The shows were incredibly exciting. When people saw them live, they were hooked.
Looking at the date sheets years later, you realise just how hard they worked during that period, like night after night, travelling all around the globe.
The music was different and was great. And they were just a great band. And they happened right at the beginning, and if they'd have continued, it would have lasted.
And ELP actually lasted a lot longer than many other bands. If you think of Cream, for example, parallel case, 3 very diverse, powerful personalities thrown together, making very exciting music, and then breaking up after just 3 years. You know, so ELP lasted a lot longer than Cream, and there was no end to the fact that people all around the world still loved their music and wanted to hear them. So that encouraged them to reunite later on, and let's hope they carry on now. I think they should carry on personally.
Putting a tag on ELP is always difficult. For me, it's an emotive journey.
It sounded like classical music, but rock version of classical music. And it just caught my attention. It was just amazing stuff that no other band wrote music like that.
That band appealed to people who appreciated musicianship, really.
I still listen to their music, and it still takes me on this emotional journey, and I can laugh, it's got humour. Keith throws in licks that make you laugh. And then Carl would start his drum solo, and within 3 minutes, 80,000 people standing up, going berserk. And then Greg's voice and guitar playing can draw tears. They're good.
You know, they weren't just another guitar band. That's for sure.
I just wanted the best damned 3-piece band in the world, really, and used all of the resources, including the marvellous invention of Dr. Robert Moog with the Moog synthesizer.
Mm-hmm. ELP had their own boffin who was employed just to come up with new ideas. How can we sequence this? How can we do that? How can we do this? And he was just there all the time. So one day I walked into the workshop and said, do you know what I need? I need a drum synthesizer. Why can't you have something we can get a sound, build it into a box, the size of a cigar box it would be. I said, I can hit the drum, one microphone can trigger the synthesizer, the other microphone will be in the PA. We'll kind of have the 2 sounds, beginning of MIDI really in a way. And I said, it'll be an okay sound. What we need, if we could put it through something where there's an octave changer, what the guitar players use today, like a mitigator, I said maybe I could drop it down an octave so every sound has got 2 sounds built in. So if I have one on every drum, I've got something like 16 drum sounds, electronic drum sounds, and I can do it all with a switch on the floor, just 2 switches. Big buttons, please, because my eyesight's not very good.
There were all these possibilities, and we just made the most out of all of the resources that we had.
That was the kind of stuff that we did, but we all did that. We're all looking all the time. And brain salad surgery was where I'd had my time with the boffin and he'd made me something. Nicholas Rose was his name, I remember him well.
I think in the long term, and the way I used to fondly remember the band, is 3 guys setting out to conquer the world and have an enormous amount of fun doing it. And that's the way I prefer to think of them, and I think that's the way their fans think of them too. Because whenever they do get together and they do play, all the rest of it, all the rubbish blows away. You know, the fact is that they are 3 very, very clever, talented people, and when they do get together, they produce something that's bigger than all 3 of them.
Do you know, it's interesting because sometimes I sit here today and I've been looking at old pictures and it seems totally unbelievable. It doesn't seem possible that I went through it all, and I've been pinching myself today looking at old photos of that time and being involved with something that was so new, so creative, so majestically put together, and to watch that band, you know, for instance, see Bill Graham, the great promoter, walk out and announce, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, Emerson, Lake and Palmer." And butterflies every night would go up and down. And I, even today, as I'm saying it, I can still feel that same emotion.
They epitomised the band that showed that musicians can actually influence the music industry. That they were the band that really showed the world that rock, classical and jazz music can be combined into this exciting, homogeneous entity that is now called progressive rock. In a strange kind of way, progressive rock itself is now an outdated phrase, because if you're going back into the past, you're not actually progressing. But if Emerson, Lake and Palmer decided to continue in the future, I think that they'd have a lot more to give and a lot more to do, and they should carry on. And I think, yes, their epitaph should be, "We started, so we should finish."
If I had to write an epitaph for ELP, I think it would have to be pictures of 3 exhibitionists. Simple as that.
I think any epitaph that I would write would probably be unprintable.
The show that finally ended, I honestly don't know.
I don't know the answer to that question. I think I would let other people do it.
If only. I think the band could have achieved so much more than it did, really. Perhaps that would be true of many, many bands that have come, and, you know, I think had we not taken the orchestral turn in the mid 70s, I think the band would have gone on to make a lot more innovative albums. I feel that frustration, you know. On the other hand, I'm very grateful personally to have been in that band and had those experiences. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, you know. It was a privilege and an honour to play in such a great band and to have such loyalty from the fans. It's because I feel that loyalty so deeply that there is an element of me which frustrates me, that and that's why I said to you, if only, you know. There's things about the history of the band that if only those things hadn't have happened, or something should have happened that didn't happen, you know, I think the band would have been even greater than it was. So there's an element of frustration, there's an element of pride, there's an element of gratitude.
I don't know, it's funny that. I mean, I'd just have to talk it up at the time, and I'd have to say that, you know, we came, we saw and we conquered, and basically we set a standard that really set an industry off on a different path. Because I definitely think we were the first of the great rock and roll shows. I'd have to say it's as long as that, because you can't put it into to few words. Because this music we played, we'd taken European music, we had developed it, we'd taken great songs, and you call us a prog band, but to be honest, we were prog for this part. We had hits, C'est la vie, Still You Turn Me On, From the Beginning, Lucky Man. These aren't prog. These are beautiful tunes. We were a complete entity. It's just because there was a Moog synthesizer there and some electronic drums, we were a prog band. It was part of the parcel. It wasn't everything. And I think that's why we were misunderstood, if there is a reason, because we did send out musical messages which were mixed. We were quite eclectic. We have a #1 single with an instrumental, or a #2 single with an instrumental. I read the paper that said #1, by the way. Fanfare for the Common Man. An instrumental. I mean, we didn't write it, but you've got to be clever to choose one and arrange it and know what to do with it. That's a skill. Apart from writing Lucky Man, which was in the top 10 in America, or C'est la Vie, which was number 1 in Canada. That's a skill. They're nothing to do with each other. But that was it. That was why it was magic. And it was keyboard driven and not guitar, very important. Classical, not blues or rock, you know. We were classically driven with the folk overtone very strong.
Extra large parts. Everyone loves potatoes. That's what the LP stands for.
Anyone would count themselves very fortunate to have been able to do that, you know, to be that. And you do develop an immunity to it after a while, walking on the stage night after night, you know, and you do have to realise, as I do, this is your question about, you know, how much delusions of grandeur. You soon realise that it's not you they're cheering for; it's what they think you are. You know. I mean, you soon learn that. You know, you're just who you are. But I mean, it was a wonderful thing to have experienced all that, and the culture, the countries, going to all the countries, and having a privileged insight into them. You know, because as a rock and roll star, because it's just straight down the Kabuki theatre. You know, would you like to come backstage and all that? You know, you get to see the world through these very privileged eyes, and I think that is very fortunate.
Do you remember the album Welcome Back My Friends to the Show That Never Ends, ladies and gentlemen, Emerson, Lake and Palmer? Well, again, like everything they did, it was class. It was absolute class. They didn't need to have, on that album, it didn't need to have a huge concept at all for the cover, because those words said it all. And, you know, they've been used, and they've been pinched, and they've been subverted ever since. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Ladies and gentlemen, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
I can't come up with anything. Extra large parts. That's better.